Happy noon hour. I'm Rosemary Goodrow, opinions editor on sunsentinel.com, a place for engaging debate. And today we have two engaging debaters ready to mix it up on the pros and cons of Amendment 2, whether Florida should legalize medical marijuana. This is a proposed amendment to the state constitution you'll see on the November ballot. It will take 60% of votes to pass. Polls show it could be a squeaker. Not a reefer, but a squeaker. With us today is John Morgan, head of Morgan & Morgan For the People law firm, who's helped bankroll this campaign. Giving voice to the opposition is Dr. Stephanie Haridopolos, a family practitioner in Melbourne. Also with us is, and she's also the wife of a former president of the Florida Senate. Also with us today is opinions writer Daniel Vasquez, who'll be helping take questions from you. If you're watching us live, you can submit questions on this site now, and we welcome you to do so. Okay, John Morgan, you're the biggest backer of medical marijuana, yet opponents say it's unproven and unnecessary. What is your argument for why voters should approve a constitutional amendment to allow the sale of medical pot?
3 reasons. 1, they didn't do it in Tallahassee. They didn't do their job. So we were forced to do this. Number 2, it works. And number 3, it's been proven to work. Anecdotally, but more importantly, the studies that you see in Israel for the last 50 years. If you do nothing else, especially if you're on the fence, look at Sanjay Gupta's special called Weed 1 and Weed 2. Once upon a time he wrote an editorial against it, but he's open-minded, he's smart, neurosurgeon. Watch those 2 specials and you will see the science behind this is real. And it works. It's not a political issue, it's an issue of compassion.
Dr. Haridopolos, is there scientific proof that it works? And what is your argument for why voters should not approve the amendment?
Thank you. And I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. So there are many reasons why. As a physician, I am very concerned that the marijuana that would be approved in this amendment is the raw version and not the honed down individual component that, as John eloquently said, does have medical benefits. So all physicians feel that smoking anything is very dangerous for your health, let alone smoking marijuana that could affect your cognition and immune system and increase risk of cancer and whatnot. There are other ways in which the delivery of medicinal marijuana or cannabidiol can be delivered, like i.e. in New York State, where it's a little bit safe and regulated. But this is not what Amendment 2 is. It really is not what it seems. It's very open-ended, very vague, filled with loopholes that I believe, as a concerned parent of 3 children, and as a physician and a person who is an advocate against the pill mills, which you live in the epicenter where the pill mills were, this is going to be pill mill take 2. I'm very concerned about it, which is why I'm come forward to speak against it.
She says that that medical marijuana doesn't need to be smoked. It can be delivered in pill form. What do you say?
Well, it is in pill form now. It's called Marinol. And guess what? It doesn't work. The only thing Marinol proves is one thing. The pharmaceutical companies know it works. But for 30, 40 years, they haven't made it work in a pill. It works as an edible, liquid, oil, smoked, edible. It works. They know it works. The pharmaceutical companies, they know it works. That's why they have Marinol. But it doesn't work unless it's done this way. My brother, who uses it every day, does it in chocolate form in the morning and at night. A small piece of chocolate. That's it. You know, when Stephanie says smoking anything is bad, what you got to remember, for most of the people who will be using this, the 300,000 to 400,000 people who will benefit, not my numbers, the state of Florida's numbers. You're talking about people with ALS and multiple sclerosis and AIDS, HIV, cancer. They're not really worried about a few puffs of smoke. They're worried about their quality of life and in many cases, dying with dignity. So when I hear people talk about the effect of smoke on an ALS patient, that's the least of their worries. When I hear people talking about our kids, I debated with somebody last night, and they said, what about our kids? They can be prescribed. When was the last time your child ever got on their bicycle, went to the doctor without you? We know we love our kids, and we throw the kids up, but it's excuse the pun, a smokescreen.
Daniel?
Well, that leads to a question from Bob Jenis from Boca Raton, who asks, essentially, what is wrong with letting someone use something so natural compared to prescription drugs that come with such serious side effects that are almost worse than the actual disease? What is wrong with that?
So the raw form of marijuana has 400 chemicals in it, not to mention insecticides, pesticides, possibly mold, growth enhancer. So you're not just getting the cannabidiol or THC, you're actually getting a raw plant that has who knows what in it. Plus, I mean, uranium, poppy seeds, and hemlock are natural too, but I don't want to smoke them.
But the marijuana you refer to, that's probably sold in the black market. That's dealers selling that. But if we had legalized medical marijuana, we would have a safer product.
And so the regulations are, I mean, who knows what we have no standards of what the potency is going to be and what the, how much the THC is going to be in there and right now in California in a lab, you could take a piece of medical marijuana there and it can maybe have 35% higher degree of pesticides and insecticides that's acceptable for vegetables and fruit consumption. So to say when you give into a private industry the public health safety, they don't always have the public health at their discretion. So there's going to be many issues that are going to come forward if this passes, where the Department of Health and the legislature is going to have their hands tied, because we need to remember this is not a law and a statute. This is a constitutional amendment that will be enshrined in our Constitution forever. It'll be in Article 10 and it'll be in Section 29. Ironically, what's in Section 27 of the same article is this tobacco-free smoking program where they educate people about prevention. How can we go from educating people about the dangers and harm of smoking to sections later putting medical marijuana, allowing smoking? I find that very ironic. The legislature did such an amazing job in eradicating the pill mills when they passed the anti-pill mill bill. That was a step forward in the right direction with public health. Section 27 would be a step in the direction of public health. 29 is going against that.
Can I follow up with that and ask you, the lessons we learned from pill mills, wouldn't that address issues that would come up?
Unfortunately, because the amendment was written with such broad immunity for unscrupulous physicians, they will not be able to be penalized. And you're also, because they didn't put an age limit on who can get it, whether you agree or not, you can get a teenager could drive to a physician that's known for being lenient and get a recommendation and get a green card for this without the parents' knowledge. We have statutes in our Constitution which protects the privacy of minors related to abortion. So that argument really doesn't hold water, what he said. Plus, we're going to have you're going to have 250,000 caregivers who can have 5 patients each. Those caregivers could be legalized drug dealers in the state of Florida. So no other state really has it in their constitution except for Colorado and Denver. California, even, the most lenient of them all, says, or any other medical conditions. They have it in their statutes, which could be amended. And by the way, out of the 23 states that have laws on the books, 17 have found the need to have it amended or changed because they found problems with it. If we have it in our Constitution, we can never change that unless we have another constitutional amendment.
Okay, let's let you respond to that. She says that because it's in the Constitution, the legislature can't pass laws to regulate it, if I understood it right. What do you say to that?
Well, that's just false. I mean, first of all, this is only step 1. Step 2 becomes the enactment of this amendment. You already see what's going on with Charlotte's Web. There's fighting, there's lawsuits. Our governor only said 5 growers can grow it who have never grown it before. You know, I'm sure Stephanie's probably opposed to that. There's growers in Canada and Colorado who can grow it, but but we've said only 5 growers here, which is crazy. It goes against everything, capitalists think about. And so what I would say to her is, this is step 1. Step 2 becomes the enactment. Just because this happens doesn't mean it's going to be in Fort Lauderdale. Cities can say we're not going to have medical marijuana dispensaries. Just because it happens now is only a very small step. For example, one of the things that we propose in our amendment is, number 1, this is safer than pill mills. Why? 16,000 people die every year from Oxycontin. Hundreds of thousands of people are hooked, and millions of family members are destroyed. In every state that they have legalized medical marijuana, oxy deaths are down 25%. That's a hard, cold fact, and the doctor will tell you that. Not one person is ever overdosed on marijuana, ever. Not one time. And so what I would say to her is, listen, let's don't scare people with things that aren't true or not going to happen. She worries about pesticides and bad dope. Listen, that's because right now, you know what people are doing? They're buying it illegally. That's where the danger is. Her friend and my friend, Don Gates, president of Florida Senate, in 1985, he's confessed that his best friend, now he ran a hospice, he's confessed that when his best friend in the world was dying, a Methodist minister, you know what he did? He went out and bought marijuana illegally. And he gave it to him. You know why? Because nothing else worked. And when he bought marijuana off the streets. And people shouldn't have to do that. And I think Stephanie would agree that's where the danger is. And who's making the money off the streets? Some drug cartel in South America. It's unsafe. Pesticides, if you're worried about pesticides, worry about what's being used right now. When Don Gates went, and we know what Don Gates said? Why he did it? He was my best friend, and I loved him. And so what I would say to Dr. Haridopolos is, don't be scared of this natural plant. Be scared of the pharmaceutical industries who are paying doctors, not Dr. Haridopolos, I would hope not, because I have a great amount of respect for her and her husband. But the pharmaceutical companies are paying doctors to go around the country and oppose this. And you know why? Because billions and billions and billions of dollars are at stake. It's about money.
I refute that statement. Here's why. There's anti-stark laws. Physicians cannot get paid by pharmaceutical companies to do things like that.
I got to stop you right there. And I got the doctor's name. If you go to Duke Pharmaceutical, who makes Oxy, there's a doctor who's on staff who gets paid by Duke. I think it's Duke that makes Oxy. And this doctor is Gelberg. Is paid by the pharmaceutical. And listen, if I'm making it up, if I'm making it up, they can sue me.
Okay. Well. All right. So anyway, so we have a 23% decrease in Oxycontin deaths in Florida, and we don't have marijuana laws really yet that have been implemented. Okay. So that. I'm not sure the causality of that one study that came out saying only marijuana states have lower Oxycontin deaths. I believe it was the anti-pill mill bill that did it and other things here in the state. I'm not refuting that there are good medicinal qualities of marijuana. I am afraid of what this amendment is going to do because it's so broad. The collateral damage of it is going to be huge. So I agree, yes, if someone was dying, sure they should be able to have anything that would work. I have compassion.
So why hasn't the Florida legislature allowed medical marijuana to people who have cancer and are sick with chemotherapy?
I think one step at a time. The Charlotte swap was just done. I think it shows that the legislature now has this open mind, that they would be willing to do something like what the Compassionate Care Act in New York did. I mean, would you ever think a few years ago that they would have even done the Charlotte's Web?
But for my amendment, no.
But But, when Charlie Crist was governor, I don't know if you even tried to get this passed at that time, and he obviously had the leadership at the time to do it. So I'm a little confused why now is the time to do
And
it.
your husband was in leadership
Well,
too.
he was never approached to do medical marijuana. I think maybe approached once about full-on legalization, which he said, no, of course I'm against that. But in his
Does
regulation,
he support medical marijuana in a way that would be properly regulated and controlled?
he probably defers to me on all of that at this point because he feels that I know a little bit more about this subject because I've done extensive research and I'm a physician and I've worked on this. So if I said that I believe it could be done safely, he would probably go with me with that. But he's a private citizen right now and doesn't have that authority.
But you do agree that there are benefits.
I do. So there's not even a
You're just
debate to
worried
that.
about- Your worry is that there could be some unscrupulous doctors who abuse it.
That's only one part of that
What
that
else?
I'm worried about.
What else do you worry about?
I mean, I'm worried about how it's not only when you put physician in the
What else
amendment.
do you worry about?
Wait,
Okay.
I'm trying to answer. So when you put physician in there, you're not sure if it's a physician as in the statute 458 MD, 459 DO, chiropractor 460. Is it a podiatrist? Is it a naturopath? I mean, a physician is a very broad term, and in the Florida statute, it's physician is physician. So I don't, you were not clear about that language. You could have added 3 more words into it, or former Speaker Ron Mills, and clarifying who actually could recommend it. You can't prescribe it because it's, illegal federally in this Schedule I drug. So it's a recommendation where
I don't
you would
think a
have to go
chiropractor is
to
a
it.
physician.
But in the Florida
Do you?
statutes.
Do you?
in
You're a
the Florida
doctor. Is a
statutes,
chiropractor a physician?
Well, a physician
answer that
means-
question.
A physician means that you can properly diagnose and
physician
treat
is not a
disease.
chiropractor.
But you see,
A
they're
physician
going
is just not
to have lawsuits to obtain the rights
Stephanie, you
that
just
the
can't say something.
Constitution has. This is from former Supreme Court Justice Bell. Kenneth Bell is saying that a lot of these lawsuits are going to come about because once you pass it in a constitution, you have given the rights and people will fight for that right.
But you just can't say things like, chiropractors are physicians.
I never said that. I said that it can be interpreted as that because
who?
they're called physicians under the Florida statute and these. So, I'll show you this later and we can
Do you
move on
think a
from that
chiropractor is a
point.
physician? You're a physician.
I don't believe that they should be able to diagnose and
Do you
treat
believe
with
a
medicines,
chiropractor
but
is a
it's not,
physician?
look, the Supreme
yes or no?
Court
Well, I
are
can't argue
going
if you-
to,
Is your point that only MDs would be able to
but that's not what they put
recommend-
in here.
Is that your point that
Basically MDs,
what is
DOs.
basically, so
DOs,
MDs,
DOs, yeah.
and it can-
Not psychologists. In California, there's psychologists that are prescribing this. My point would be it's MDs, DOs.
In California, let's talk about California for a minute, because people in California can get a license, a medical pot card pretty easily. They can have a hangnail, they can have an upset stomach, they can have problems sleeping at night, and I think California, the experience there is one that people don't want to replicate here. How do we if this were to pass, how do you ensure that what happened in California, where these dispensaries are every place and the people who are hanging out in them are a pretty sad lot, that doesn't happen here?
Great question. Before we started this, we did a lot of polling and we did a lot of focus groups. You know what people told us? By and large was we don't want to be California. We want to be the opposite of California. We don't want to be a wink and a nod and just come and get it. So for this bill, for this amendment, here's how it works. You come to the doctor's office. The doctor meets with you. We've laid out what we consider debilitating illnesses. AIDS, ALS, multiple sclerosis. We've kind of given a map.
Why did you put or any other conditions in there like California?
Because
then?
that's a great question. Because what if I forgot one? And I did. You know what I forgot? Hold on. You know what I forgot? And I forgot the people I should have been thinking about the most. I forgot about the veterans. I don't have post-traumatic stress disorder in there, for example. But you know who's called me more than anybody thanking me? We've had 11 years and 3 wars, and our veterans have come back destroyed, crippled. The only thing for many of them that works is medical marijuana.
But is
That's
that
your opinion.
anecdotal or is that
That's
that's your opinion.
scientific.
That's not
There's a
scientific.
scientific study that proves that medical marijuana treats.
Anxiety, yes,
It does,
yes.
Time out. No, it doesn't.
Okay.
No, it doesn't.
Well,
It doesn't treat anxiety. It's actually been proven the other way. It actually can promote anxiety
No.
and increase the risk of psychosis and schizophrenia by 6 times. Not true.
Isn't that the movie Reefer Madness?
Yes, 1948.
Okay, so
Exactly, that is reefer madness.
So the way he did it was, all the other states say, except for California, that you can add or subtract medical illnesses if you forget one, either through the Department of Health or the equivalent of that, or through the legislature. They didn't give that in this, because this is a constitutional amendment. So you could have done 13 diseases, like Nevada, and then added to it or subtracted if you saw that there was people that are getting, addiction problems from it or whatever. But 95% in California, in Colorado,
Don't talk about California, Colorado, because here's the
Okay.
important thing. Everybody that I debate
He stopped me
talks
'cause
about
I had a really good
California.
point.
No, it's not.
We'll come
You get a
back
good
to you.
point.
Okay.
The reason I stopped you is talk about Arizona. Don't talk about states where it's legal. Don't talk about California, because my point, Stephanie, is this. We want to be the opposite of California.
Okay, let's let her finish
Yes.
her point.
So 95% of the diseases that are being treated, or people who have the green cards in those states, are for chronic pain, which is very subjective, not objective. Only 5% of the people who have the diagnosis of Parkinson's and ALS and AIDS and HIV and wasting syndrome and the things that he talks about. So and the average age is from age 17 to 35, white males that have these green cards for the diagnosis of chronic pain who really don't have a history of a debilitating chronic illness. So that's how.
Are you concerned that this is really a gateway to recreational use of
It's de
marijuana?
facto like legalization here in the state.
And what's the argument against that?
I'm a big anti-drug person in general, because I feel that it destroys your willingness to be motivated in life. I think it destroys families. I think I saw what happened with Oxycontin. I see what happens with marijuana. It changes part of your brain. It decreases your IQ. People drop out of school. It could cause you to have mental illnesses and multiple other things. So it's not a good thing for an adolescent to be priming their brain. Your brain is still growing until you're like in your 20s. To be exposed to that, your brain is still developing, being wired. To be exposed to that drug at that age negatively affects your life
What if it
multiple
was
times.
like alcohol, though, where you're 21 and over?
Well, I mean, alcohol definitely has negative ramifications. We see that. We see what
it's
the
legal.
social costs. So the burden.
A lot of people treat their anxiety with alcohol.
So alcohol and tobacco are the greatest burdens in our society. Those are legal drugs. Why do we want to have a third legal drug? I mean, for each dollar of revenue that we receive from alcohol and tobacco, we have to spend $10 in social costs to clean up the mess, if you will. There's 2.7 million arrests per year because of alcohol-related regulatory laws. That is not the answer. And certainly, if you legalize it, there's still going to be a black market that exists, whether you legalize it. No, I don't think a guy with a bag of pot should go to jail if he gets caught with it. But then again, if you look at the statistics in our state prisons, less than 0.1% of the people in prison are there because of that minor incident that happened in their life. Usually it's something else going on.
So there are pros and cons in the use of, or the legalization argument for medical marijuana. And one of the arguments against it is that more people will be smoking pot, and as you said, it'll hurt people. And although, as Danny points out, if you regulated it so that people under 21 or under 18 couldn't buy it, it might address your concern about young people using it. But the benefits, the pros side would say you could control it, you could regulate it, you could ensure the kind of quality, you could tax it, you'd lower crime, you'd have fewer people in prisons.
And we don't even know if it's going to be tax exempt or not, because typically medicine is not taxable. It's never been taxed. So it would be up to the legislature whether it's not taxed. So the argument is saying that we're going to get money from this in the future.
Don't you think it'll be taxed?
Well, I mean, I can't speak to that because I don't know
but
if it will or not, but that's an unknown variable.
Why would they not tax it?
We don't
Why
know.
would they not tax it?
It's an unknown variable. We don't know if it's going to be.
Is this the first step toward legalizing recreational marijuana?
Not for me. I mean, not for me. I don't care. I mean, I am more of a libertarian than anything else, but not for me. That's not my issue. But every time you hear somebody say, this is a de facto legalization of marijuana, I stop listening, with all due respect. Because when she says that,
I know you do.
she says that because she can't argue for medical marijuana not being legal. Whenever somebody makes up something that's just not true, this is not the de facto legalization of marijuana. That's like saying the speed limit's 55, but it's really not, it's 100. How do you argue with that? How do you argue with somebody who goes, just because they raise the speed limit to 65, it's really, they're going to drive at 100. How do you argue with that?
Did you say recently that potheads should come out and vote for this amendment?
Yes.
And what did you mean by that?
What I meant by that is, I don't know if that's called them potheads, but if young people vote, this will pass. My greatest worry in this election, listen, one thing that polls show, and you all sit on all the time, the electorate is very unmotivated about any race in Florida. There's really no reason to vote. When you ask Florida voters, with all due respect to all the candidates who are running, nobody wants any of them. But what I'm counting on is people doing something for each other. And if there's a way, I got 4 children who are now 31, 29, 27, 25. I can't get them to answer a landline if it rings next to them at the house. They're very hard to motivate. What I'm hoping to do is to motivate them to get up, don't vote for the governor, attorney general, CFO, whatever. Go up and vote for each other. Do this one act of service and this act of compassion. And so I'm doing everything I can in my power. The reason I spend so much time in the bus is because I probably have thousands of pictures taken of the bus that goes out to social media that this man over here is operating right here. If young people vote this election, we pass.
But isn't this also about getting Charlie Crist elected?
No, absolutely not. Listen, I have heard that and heard that and heard that. When Ben Polera approached me with this, Charlie Crist wasn't even on my radar screen. In May of last year, I was having dinner with Bill Nelson at Luma Restaurant in Winter Park, Florida, saying you should run for governor. I think, listen, Charlie Crist is to me the best candidate because he's a real person who really cares about people. I don't know why he wants to do it, but it has nothing to do with Charlie Crist. And Ben Polera will tell you, when he met with me, Charlie Crist was nowhere on my radar screen. And so people who want to think I'm this kind of Machiavellian that is willing to put my money up to help Charlie Crist get 1% of the vote, it's just not true.
What do you say to that?
I don't know what his motives are. I mean, I do believe there's some altruistic intentions because of his experiences with his family. I certainly know what it's like to lose a loved one to cancer. My stepfather, who I love dearly, died of lung cancer, and I hated to see him suffer. I definitely know that his lung cancer is probably due to smoking, though. So that's kind of part.
What would you say to your stepfather, though, if he said to you he's sick and he's dying, and he says, "I'd like to try it to see if it does bring relief"?
Well, when you have lung cancer, you're worried about getting opportunistic infections.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, like I said, I'm not opposed to it. If it was given in perhaps in a vapor or capsule, that's a little bit different. What they're doing in New York is different.
What about chocolate?
I've never recommended a medication in a food before, nor in a smokable form. So
my brother uses chocolate, for example.
I know, speaking of chocolate, I mean, this is what the medical marijuana chocolate looks like. And it looks like Kit Kats and Oreos and Butterfingers and Crunch Bars. And these are like really serious problems in the future with our kids, because this is like saying to them, hey, this is fine, it's candy, take it. That's the problem with the edibles. So I'm very concerned about that part. If it was strictly for the sick and dying, sure, it's just not going to be
you think
that way.
Leslie's is selling medical marijuana in their pack? Are you saying that on this? Are you saying that these people, that these big companies, because if you are, that's slander. Are you, hold on, this, if you're saying,
This
are you
is
saying?
was confiscated from the DEA,
No.
from dispensaries,
I'm asking
leaving
you,
Colorado.
I'm asking you, because you held this up, are you saying Nestle's is selling medical marijuana?
No, I'm saying it's not called Nestle.
Oh,
That's not Nestle.
oh, it's not, okay.
Oh no, that's Buddha Finger and
Okay.
Keef Cat.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Oreo, not Oreo.
We saw something similar with
No.
vapors, right? And they were marketing with flavors that were appealing to kids, and strawberry and banana, whatever it was. And then the legislature fixed that. And
Yeah.
Well,
couldn't we do the same?
Well, I would hope so. The problem is, here's the deal. The Department of Health has 6 months to regulate this from the day it goes into effect. Do you really think that 6 months is enough time with a projection of 1,800 dispensaries and 250,000 caregivers and all the marijuana and the growers and everything to set the rules forth on a very minimal budget that they have with only maybe 13 employees overseeing this for the state? And if it's not done in 6 months, then it stays as broad as it is in the amendment enshrined in our Constitution and cannot be changed.
We pulled off something similar with class size constitutional amendment. We got that done in 6 months.
We're dealing with something totally different that has to do with medicine. Medicine by ballot measure is bad medicine. It is a terrible precedent to set in the healthcare industry. When they wrote this amendment, they didn't ask physicians for their input. Trial lawyers wrote it without medical input. I have a hard time with that. I mean, 15 national organizations are against smokable marijuana for reasons, because they've done evidence-based medicine. It lacks the standardization and the individual meter dosage for us to be able to say, yes, we know it's not going to interact with the other medications. We know what the frequency is. You know, you're not even getting it from your pharmacist. And most of your doctors are probably not even going to be willing to prescribe this, so you're going to have to go to somebody else who doesn't really know your history as well and give you a recommendation for this.
Well, that brings up a reader's question, which is the amendment puts the power in doctors' hands to recommend medical marijuana. Why not trust doctors with that decision, since we already trust them with so much?
So again, like the doctors were catapulted into the middle of this argument without even being asked.
But marijuana's
here.
been here since the ages.
So-
you guys have had a chance to do this.
Okay,
the
so
research
because
and-
of the raw form, it lacks that individual standardized component that we're talking about. A lot of research hasn't been done. I hope that New York, with the Compassionate Care Act, now starts gaining data and research, because it is standardized from one unit to the next. So you can have controlled trials there.
If somebody came to you that was dying of ALS and nothing was working, would you prescribe medical marijuana for them if this passes?
I would prescribe Marinol because it is FDA approved,
But
and
no, that's
it
not my
is.
question. That doesn't work. We know that. But would you, if somebody was on their deathbed with ALS,
If it was done in a way in which it was an acceptable delivery system, and I knew exactly what they were getting.
And you knew who the dispensary was,
And the
and the
schedule
bar.
drug was not a 1, and it was
Yeah.
a 2, and the federal law changed.
would you?
Perhaps, but a lot of things would have to happen to get to that point.
But that's a yes.
That is whatever you want to
And
say.
that gets to a question from John Kelly, one of our viewers right now. John wants to know, do you believe cannabis should be removed from the federal false Schedule 1 list?
I think that if it went to 2, then we would have a lot more research and data to be able to go forward and actually produce products with safe delivery systems, with standardized units from one to the next, and we wouldn't be having this discussion.
Let's make no mistake about this. The reason it's a Schedule 1 drug is once upon a time there was a movie called Reefer Madness. And Reefer Madness stood for the proposition that a black man might seduce a white woman with marijuana. Period. End of story. Then they said, let's don't call it cannabis, let's call it marijuana. Because it was called cannabis until that time. The Schedule 1 drug came as a result of racism, hatred, bigotry, and meanness. And because it is a Schedule 1 drug, we cannot have the studies that Dr. Haridopolos would like. It's paradoxical. The dog is chasing the tail forever and ever and ever and ever.
I agree with that, but not the first
she
part.
agrees with she agrees with me.
don't know about the first part.
Because of the racism that was the genesis of this Schedule 1 drug. We're sitting here today with no studies here, no FDA, and by the way, I don't trust the FDA at all.
But you trust the Department of Health and the legislature to enact and regulate all the laws.
Yes.
You're speaking out of both sides of your
I
mouth.
trust doctors. No, I don't trust the legislature for nothing because they've done nothing. That's why I'm here.
Okay.
I don't trust the legislature for nothing.
What
But I
happened?
do trust doctors. And she just confessed that yes, she would prescribe it. You know why? Because she's a good person and she's a compassionate person, and if she could help her patients, she would.
There was a lot of things that had to go into effect before I would prescribe it.
If you want to look at the science on it, go to Israel. 50 years. If you want to look at the science on it, if you want to be open-minded, and I don't know if you've ever done this, Stephanie, have you ever watched the two Sanjay Gupta specials called Weed 1 and Weed 2?
Yeah,
Have you?
I have.
What did you think about that?
I think that he didn't make it very clear the difference between the low THC, non-smokable version that the children can benefit from in the oil-based versus the smokable raw plant form. I think that it was very confusing to the viewers for that because there's a big difference, and I think that people are seeing, oh, let's help those kids with seizures. Of course, yes, let's vote yes on it. But they don't understand that this is not what they're voting on, and that there are so many collateral damage issues that can come forward from this if they pass it in this light in our Constitution. That's what I'm trying to bring to light to people. I have to take my political hat, my medical hat, my constitutional law hat, my law enforcement hat, and try to figure out, okay, how do I explain it in a way where people can understand this and comprehend it, and then be able to vote with knowledge what they're voting on and what could happen.
What happens if this amendment doesn't pass? And you said that you believe in compassionate use of medical marijuana for people who suffer the kinds of conditions that have been outlined. If this amendment does go down, do you believe from the energy that's been created around this that the Florida legislature will really look at
I do.
approving? What
I
makes
do.
you think that?
I believe because, a year ago, maybe I would say, but they passed the Charlotte's Web, and that was one step. And I think that they've seen a really good argument on their side, and that there are a lot of people who would want to do it in a safe, regulated way. So if they drafted a law or a bill that would hopefully become a law if they did it the right way, then they would be able to outline the regulations before. This is like, well, let's just pass it and then we'll see what's in the bill later. No, we don't really know what's going to happen because of the lawsuits that are going to happen
And the reason I
to
don't
get
think it
the
would happen is
constitutional
because,
rights.
listen, Tallahassee is run by money. Money rules Tallahassee. The powerless, the sick, have no money. Big Pharma has all the money. And I don't think any of us are naive enough not to know what would happen. The Oxycontin people who make billions of dollars would be in Tallahassee in full force thwarting this. You disagree with that?
I do.
You think they just want to go
I
out
don't
of business?
think one thing has to do with the other.
You don't think that the makers of Oxycontin
Then they
against this?
weren't there with the anti-pill mill bill went through. They weren't there.
They weren't where?
I mean, in Tallahassee, it passed. It didn't. I mean, it passed. If they were the big pharma was so against it.
Do you think the makers of Oxycontin want this to pass?
I don't care what they think.
No, what
Want
do
to
you
know
think?
why?
No,
Because
no.
I wish they would go out of business because I hate what
So do-
Oxycontin does
so-
to people.
I know-
Okay, but I also
exactly.
don't like what marijuana does to people too.
Marijuana
Look,
doesn't kill people.
But, that's not true.
That
We
is
see
true.
Suicides, car accidents, guy shooting his wife when he ate a brownie
Listen,
in
let me tell you something.
Colorado.
Wait a
It
minute.
does
No, wait a
kill
minute. Let me
people,
just
and
tell-
there
I
are
wanna-
long-term effects to it
listen, not
too.
one person's ever died from marijuana overdose. You know where the highest incidence of domestic violence is? Super Bowl Sunday. Booze. Gateway drug, people go from vodka and Red Bull and tequila to cocaine. People go from marijuana to bed.
So
Nobody, to make this,
But if you're the children,
to try to put marijuana
Wait.
in a
I
category.
mean, I know it's kind of funny, but if you're the children that just watched your mom get shot by the father who just had a marijuana brownie, I think you might not be saying
I
that.
don't believe that.
Okay, so that was proven.
Where?
That's in
You can give us that.
I got it right here.
Yeah, give us that.
Let
Sure.
me ask you this about what happens if this doesn't pass, because there is a business that is growing around medical marijuana already.
You see the signs on I-95.
We are seeing these, the state says we're going to have 5 major businesses. We've got all sorts of big businesses. These are not potheads who are wanting to get into the business of marijuana. These are big businesses that want to open warehouses and distribution channels and produce it. And so we see you're right about the money that drives Tallahassee, but there's money now that is generating business in Tallahassee around the first form of medical marijuana
No
that's
doubt.
been approved. So why do you think, if this amendment isn't passed, that we won't see the business case for medical marijuana convince the job creators in the Florida legislature to go ahead with medical marijuana as a law rather than an amendment?
Because I believe that the power of the big pharmaceutical companies, listen, the success I've had in life has largely come, some of it's come from my attractions and hotels, but a large part of it has come from suing pharmaceutical companies and tobacco companies. And I've had some of the biggest verdicts and the biggest cases in America. I have been inside their systems. These are not good people. These people who make these drugs and who make this tobacco and give it to us are killing us. They're killing us, and they know it. 50,000 people die every year from tobacco use. When you smoke a cigarette, you see that little brown stuff on the
500,000 per year.
500,000 per year. Excuse me, thank you,
Yeah,
Doctor.
that's a big difference.
They're killing us on purpose. And you know why they're killing us? Billions and billions and billions of dollars. When you smoke a cigarette, that little brown thing you see on the filter, that's not tar and nicotine. When it gets hot, it turns brown, so you think it's protecting you. These are evil people, and they're in the business to make money. And so when I look at this plant that's been put into nature by God for us, and it works, and nobody's ever died from it, and nobody's ever gone on a rampage from it, and families have not been destroyed. When I look at that as the alternative to things like Oxycontin and Xanax, our country is so stoked up on pharmaceuticals. If the kid can't sit still in kindergarten, we dope him up with Ritalin. If the kid can't study in high school, we dope her up with Adderall, which is synthetic cocaine. If you can't have sex or go to the bathroom, or you're depressed, we dope you up. How did this country become, and I'll tell you how, because pharmaceutical companies come into doctors' offices and they bring their pills and they bring their goodies and they have their steak dinners and they give their monies and they give their honorariums, and they have bought the doctors.
But do you not think that the big marijuana industry will follow suit in the same
No, because
big
here's why.
tobacco
Because
industry?
this is the great point.
How is it different? I mean, we have
Here's why.
Wall Street
Here's how it
holdings,
works.
private industry,
This is how it works.
companies, and shareholders.
Here's how it's working. I think you're going to like this.
Okay, I'm listening.
Because we already know you'll prescribe it if it's legal.
Okay.
You've admitted that.
Whatever.
Thank you. But that was important.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
thank you. But
And I, no, wait a minute, I said if it changes to a Schedule 2, okay, so,
Between-
you want to spin my words, whatever,
but listen,
it's-
here's how it
there's a lot
works
of
now.
ifs there.
Here's how it works now. Person comes into the doctor's office, they prescribe Oxycontin. Here's the prescription. They go around the back to the pharmacy and they get the pills. That's how it works now. With us, the regulation is so strenuous. You come into the doctor's office, he prescribes it. It's then sent to Tallahassee. Now there's a record of this doctor prescribing it.
Recommending, 'cause you can't prescribe.
Recommending, because you can't, because it's Schedule 1, because of the racism.
Right.
It comes back, the card comes back to the patient, and now there's a record, and then the card is gone to the medical dispensary. And what we propose for the legislature to do, to make it illegal for a doctor to prescribe and sell marijuana. And if you do that, Stephanie, all of your concerns are gone.
No.
All of your
That's not
concerns
true.
are gone. Because now, if a doctor is going to start giving we'll have a record of who that doctor is. Right now, we don't know who's giving out Oxycontin. Do you have a pharmacy in your office?
No, the pharmacy.
The doctors do. You know that.
And the pill mill bill stopped the narcotics from being dispensed from the doctor's offices. So it could be regulated with the PDMP, the Physicians Prescribing Monitoring Drug System. So we won't have that ability to be able to have this in a centralized unit that you can check what the person's been prescribed. So right now the pharmacy can check to see if you've been on a Schedule 2, 3, or 4 drug right now because of the anti-pill mill bill. Whereas you will not be able to have that with marijuana. Real pharmacists will have no idea whether or not it's interacting with your current medications that you're on because there's no centralized database
So the doctor
for
will
it.
know.
But are you going to go to your doctor? Or if your doctor says no, you're going to go maybe to the guy who has a reputation down the street, right next to that abandoned pipe, whatever.
If you want to say,
you might not necessarily get it from your primary care physician.
The one thing that I can't argue is like if there's people making up these things, I can't stop crooks. I can't stop a crooked doctor. I can't stop a crooked pharmacist. You go online every day, you'll see a pharmacist at a Publix or a Kroger's being arrested for. We can't stop crooks. There is nothing that's going to be fail-safe. But by and large, if you buy into this, you have to agree with this proposition that in Florida, we trust our doctors. There's crooked lawyers, there's crooked cops, there's crooked doctors. But do we throw the baby out with the bathwater to these 300,000 or 400,000 people who would suffer because of a crooked pharmacist?
Well, to speak to Dr. Stephanie's point earlier that this amendment opens up things a little loosey-goosey so that you have caretakers. And let's talk about that. The caretaker isn't the patient who has the cancer. It's someone chosen by the patient. And it could be a minor, it could be somebody who's a drug dealer. That issue, talk about that.
Well, it could be, I'll talk about that in this way. Right now, not only in Florida, but in America, and you can Google this right this minute, 48% of all caregivers in nursing homes have a criminal record. There's no background searches in nursing homes. Okay? Think about that. 48% of people in nursing homes are being cared for by criminals. So
We
if
don't
you
know that they're criminals just because they haven't had a background check.
no, we know they are because
How do you know they're criminals if there's no background check?
we've testified in the United States Senate on this issue. Nursing home abuse is one of my issues, and we know it because once we've got inside of it into the litigation, that's how we found it
You're
out.
saying half the people who work in nursing homes are criminals?
Have a criminal background, yes. And that is a hard, cold fact. Now listen.
Do we make it worse though by allowing caretakers
listen, we
without
have to
any
listen,
medical training?
because what you got to remember, why are we calling them caretakers and caregivers? You know why? Because the patient's terminal. The guy with a hangnail doesn't need a caregiver. The caregiver is the person at the hospice. The caregiver is the person in the bedroom at your home when you're laying there wasting away with multiple sclerosis. The caregiver could be your son or your daughter or your husband. The caregiver is only involved if you can't care for yourself.
But unfortunately, it's going to be abused and it'll be legalized.
Why would you get a caregiver? Why would you need a caregiver?
But isn't the argument that
Unless you're dying.
Isn't the argument that it'll
Right? Does anybody see that?
Yeah.
Why do you need a caregiver unless you're dying? You can take it yourself. A caregiver's there
They
to
could have said without who did not have a felony.
But why would you
So
have
I'm
a
just saying.
caregiver if you didn't need one?
I know, but they could
Is
have.
that right?
So 250. The Department of Health said 250,000 caregivers for the state, possibly times 5. They can have 5 patients per caregiver. That's 1.25 million
Because those people are terminal.
But
you only need a caregiver if you're terminal.
couldn't that be abused?
Why would I need a
I don't want to go into the clinic, so I get a caregiver.
Right.
Are there
That's where the kids are going to get it
definitions
from.
of-
No, I just go get
caregivers.
it myself.
But if I don't want to go in there because somebody might see me, maybe I can find a caregiver who will go
Exactly.
in there and get it.
Why would you not want to go in there?
Well, maybe there's a stigma.
You know-
If it's
about it.
legal and you're dying,
Well,
But maybe
Let me tell you
If
something.
95%
You wouldn't
of
go
people
in
are
there-
not dying that are
You wouldn't
using
go
it.
in there, you'd crawl in there. If you're dying, you wouldn't just go in, you'd crawl in. Let me tell you something about death. I don't know if any of you have ever had somebody close to you die.
I think we all have.
But when it gets to that point, nothing else matters. There is no pride. There is nothing else when you're saying goodbye to the people you love the most. And when we talk about caregivers, we're talking about somebody getting in an automobile, going down to the dispensary, coming back and giving it to them like I did to my father in a hospital bed in a condominium.
I think you meant well, but I think that you probably could have made it a little bit more clear and prevented some of the abuse that can come forward by giving the caregivers so much rights.
I don't worry about the caregivers. The caregivers have to be 21 years of age.
See, I don't know if you noticed, but the summary, the ballot summary can only be limited to 75 words, but the
Right.
actual ballot itself could be infinity. And they chose 1,196 words, but they could have put more in there to make it more restrictive, so we wouldn't be having this argument right now. So I think that, I don't think it was incompetence. I think part of it was intentional to be as wide open as it is.
Okay, I want to ask you, just for clarity's sake, you said you would prescribe it for compassionate care. So say,
So, but I
let
said-
me just
okay.
ask the question.
We got that on film, by the way.
If you've got somebody with cancer and they're going through chemotherapy and they are dying, what would you, what would need to happen before you said you would want to give it, but you had a lot of ifs, and I'm not sure I understand why it's as big a deal to you that it be a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2. What would need to happen for you to agree to prescribe it to somebody who might benefit from
So
it?
if I was a physician in New York and they pass a law and it takes 18 months to implement their law, and I felt it was done in the right way and that I knew that they were going to get medical grade, bar-coded, standardized medicine in a vapor or a capsule form, I would do it in the right way. But I would never prescribe a
about edible?
smokable form.
What about edible?
I'm not sure about that yet because I think the science is evolving. I'm not sure what the potency is. I'm not really sure how it's changed. And because the science
you're
is
coming
evolving,
along.
the science is evolving, so when you have a constitutional amendment, you can't change it as science evolves, unless you do another constitutional amendment.
And the regulations can't change?
So everyone's going to want to keep it as wide open as it is because they'll have rights, constitutional rights. What other private industry do you know has constitutional rights? They're giving big marijuana industry constitutional
Well,
rights.
I think that the United States Supreme Court said that companies have constitutional rights.
But-
In Citizens United, right?
But in our state constitution, to give specific rights on how wide open they can do their business and not have any negative ramifications of lawsuits, sweeping immunity for the growers to the dispensers
That's not
to
true.
the
That's just not true.
patients
That's
to.
just not true.
But that's what's written in
That-
your
Are there
amendments.
immunities? Is there? Are there
Yeah, I would
immunities in
love
that?
to show you the immunities that are in there
Tell
in
them.
section A1.
Oh, you tell us, John.
Well, look, the only immunity is so limited. It doesn't, if there's pesticides that are put on there that hurt people, there's no immunities from that.
Okay, we have a question from one of our reporters, Dan Sweeney. Dan?
Hi. The wording in the amendment says it has a pretty comprehensive list of debilitating diseases, and the exact wording after that is or other conditions for which a physician believes that the medical use of marijuana would likely outweigh the potential health risks for the patient. What exactly is to stop doctors? These are not crooked doctors. They could, like you said earlier, you can't stop crooked doctors. But these are doctors that necessarily, aren't crooked, but really believe that the health benefits of marijuana outweigh their patients' sudden acute back pain. What's to stop those doctors from giving medical marijuana to people that just suddenly developed back pain yesterday?
Well, look, the Supreme Court has ruled that this language is constitutional. Let's start with that. We have laid out a roadmap to these doctors. We've told them what we think is debilitating. We laid it out. ALS, AIDS, cancer. If you and you're not a doctor, and I'm not a doctor, but in context, when you look at that amendment and you see those diseases, you understand it's a serious and grave illness.
But again, what's to stop a doctor from?
There's nothing to stop a crooked doctor from doing anything.
But they wouldn't be breaking the law by giving medical marijuana to somebody with back pain, would
They
they?
would just be a bad doctor. And listen, I can't stop that now. Doctors are giving out today Percocet, Darvocet, Xanax, morphine, Oxy. I can't stop them. I cannot make everybody ethical. If I could, I would. But I have to trust the doctors, and then I have to go, and then I have to say, but what is worse? A doctor who prescribes Oxy or a doctor who prescribes medical marijuana? What is the lesser of the two evils if they're both prescribed illegally? And to me, that is not even close. And I don't think the good doctor would disagree with me that.
It lacks,
And I don't know, do you prescribe Oxycontin?
It lacks
Do you prescribe
uniform-
Oxycontin? Do you prescribe
It
Oxycontin?
lacks uniformity and objectivity in saying any other medical conditions. And it's a circular argument. So if a physician believes that a patient has a debilitating condition, but then defining debilitating condition is whatever the doctor believes it to be. So it is a circular argument. And the Supreme Court
Would you prescribe it for a hangnail?
No, but
Why not?
Because I
You're ethical.
wouldn't prescribe it.
You're ethical.
So the Supreme Court only judged that they only had two questions. Is it a single subject, and is the ballot summary clear enough to give fair notice? And they judged that. Whatever comments they made out of that was gratuitous dicta or unenforceable comments. They just kind of gave their opinion of what really debilitating is. So that is a problem. If any other medical conditions weren't in there, and then later on they added the conditions, the legislature's Department of Health, there wouldn't be as much avenues for the unscrupulous physicians to have the pot pill mills.
Do you prescribe Oxycontin now?
Very, very rarely.
But you do.
So I have in the past.
what is your point?
Rarely.
The point is, Oxycontin is very, very addictive
think
and
maybe
dangerous.
4
I don't believe
total.
it should ever be prescribed by any doctor under any set of circumstances.
Well, what if that's the only thing when someone was dying on their bed that would help them, though? I think that.
Bingo. Guess what we got coming?
But, I mean-
Medical marijuana.
But
That's my point.
what if
That's my
medical
point.
marijuana is not enough, and what if they need Oxycontin
They
too?
don't. They do not.
I mean, look, I'm not saying it, but I'm using your argument
on the
back at
On the
you.
deathbed, it's called morphine.
Exactly. So we know that that's a standardized dose from one unit to the next, given in a controlled way.
Okay, I think we're going to take one more reader question, and then we're going to, kind of summarize it up. Danny?
This is the gotcha question from our readers. D. Pravat. Obviously, doctor, you've done your research, you've done your homework, you know what you're talking about. And you mentioned objectivity. Our readers want to know, have you tried pot?
I did in high school one time, and you know what? It didn't help me at all. And I think that it helps the communication channels with your children when you can talk about drugs and possibly your experience. But 50% of kids do try it before they graduate high school, and I think if this passes, I think that we're going to see a lot more accessibility, and that number will go up. 1 in 6 kids, if they try it by age 16, will become addicted to it. By age 14, 1 in 4. So if we have the accessibility out there, you better believe we're going to have more addicts out there. And the marijuana industry wants to get them addicted young. That's why they have things like this. Because why? That ensures their revenue going forward for generations to come. That's the problem.
So one quick question following up on the other. We talked about what happens if it doesn't pass. What happens if the amendment does pass? What needs to happen right away? And do you have confidence that government can create the regulation that will make it work as best as we can't.
It's going to be tough. They only have 6 months, and they have 9 months to issue the identification cards. And if they don't, then just the recommendation is going to be what that's in the amendment. I think they're going to work hard at it, but I think that they lack the personnel, the employees to really regulate all the anticipated dispensaries. You're going to have 1,800 dispensaries. That's more than Starbucks, Walmart, and McDonald's combined in the state of Florida. How could one state agency who has so much already on their plate with already Charlotte's Web and everything else that they have to do with the 67 county health departments really do a good job at that? I am concerned. And I'm concerned that the legislature, whatever they do to try to regulate it, the hands will be tied, and then there'll be lawsuits, and then they'll be reversed by the courts.
Okay, and I'm going to come back to you in a minute with making your pitch, your final pitch. What happened, and then to you, but first, what happens if this does pass? What happens now to make sure that we don't have an epidemic of pill mills?
Everything I've said before is going to happen. If we regulate it the way we're going to do, and we don't let doctors have their own pharmacies, you're not going to have pill mills. What's going to happen is that 300,000 or 400,000 people who are really, really sick are going to have relief. They're going to have the compassion they've been looking for. They're not going to have to send their loved ones out to buy illegal drugs that could be tainted and poisoned, pesticides. They're going to get to go out where it's regulated and bring it home and give it to their mother who has multiple sclerosis. And what's going to happen is, here in Florida, we're going to take a big sigh of relief. And Republicans and Democrats and independents are going to pat each other on the back, and you're going to say, you know what? This election wasn't about all those politicians who do nothing, who care more about the next election than their next door neighbor. We did this for each other, and there's going to be a gigantic celebration from the 80-year-old at the hospice to the 18-year-old in the colleges throughout the state. We're going to congratulate each other, and we're going to say, you know what, we did this for each other.
So
And that's what this election is about.
Okay, so just wrapping up. So what do you want to leave people with? What is the message that
If you vote no on this doesn't mean you lack compassion. And just if you ever smoke pot, don't feel guilted that you have to vote yes on this. This is about making sure our society is going to be safe as a whole, and making sure that we're not causing harm. As a doctor, first, do no harm. And I'm not sure prescribing or recommending this would be do no harm first. I'm thinking about my children. I don't want them growing up in a society where there's dispensaries all over the place and the accessibility is high, and people are driving on the roads drugged on marijuana, and increase in car accidents 3 times, and poison control calls. I don't want to do that. That's why I had to dig deep within my soul and go, are you ready to be forward on this issue? Because this is a big issue. People are going to try to obviously be mean to you or say things nasty about you, but you know what? I had to wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and go, I like who I see, and I can't know what I know and not say something. I'm doing this for my children, and I'm doing this for the future of Florida.
and what would you like to leave people with?
When I look in the mirror, I like who I see, but I don't like what I see, because I've gotten older and fatter. I would leave people, if I looked like her, I'd like what I saw. What I would leave people is this. I know this lady, and I know her husband, who I have the greatest amount of respect for. I've had steaks and brown liquor at their house when he was Senate President. And I think he did a great job reducing pill mills in Florida. I think Mike Haridopolos is one of the, great senators we had. But what I would leave people with is this. Look, when you drive by a pharmacy, are you scared of the pharmacy? You know what's in those pharmacies? You know what damage could be done if those pharmacies could spill out into the street? Have you ever driven to a big city and not seen a Walgreens and a CVS on every corner? That's the danger. If you worry about your children, worry about those pharmacies. If you worry about your children, every time you hand them a Ritalin caplet, worry about that. Every time you see Adderall worry about that. This, by and large, is an end-of-life solution or a problem where you're fighting for your life. These drugs don't work. The Marinol doesn't work. They know that marijuana works. That's why they got the drug Marinol. I bet you Stephanie has if ever, prescribed Marinol. And the reason is it doesn't work. It's a placebo. The people we're going to be helping are at the end of their life or they're fighting for their life. And when you're a breast cancer survivor, or if you're fighting for your life, and the chemo is ravaging your body, and the anxiety and the nausea and the loss of appetite is killing you as much as the cancer itself, and this little piece of chocolate can make the difference, that's who we're talking about here. This is not the de facto legalization of marijuana. If I wanted to do that, I would have done that. My wife is more conservative than Stephanie. God help me. People say, why do you stay married to her? I say, you ever seen her? She's hot. But she is the most conservative woman that I've ever met in the whole world. She has voted against, one time I had a flat tire on election day. I swear to God, I thought she let the air out of my left tire to stop me from going to the polls. I was like, did you let the air out of my tire? Even her, Ultima Morgan. This money I put in, as she'll tell you, is half of hers.
How much have you put in?
Over $4 million now. But listen, if I was out here trying to legalize marijuana, my wife would be sitting here in that seat, wagging her finger at me and saying, no, not on my watch, John. My wife is as conservative as the Haridopoulos, or maybe more so. But my wife is a person of compassion. And in the grand scheme of things, and nothing's perfect, if the Florida legislature had done their job, I wouldn't be sitting here. If I hadn't done this, do you think there'd be a Charlotte's Web? No. No way. No way. And even if I fail for Charlotte's Web for those little children with epilepsy, it was worth the $4 million. You only get to do this life one time. You can't know something is right and sit still. So this is my time. This is my moment. I promise you, they asked me last night in Sarasota, you plan on running for office? Hell no. This will be the last time you're going to see me doing anything like this. I'm old, I'm fat, I'm gray, and after this, I'm tired. But this has been my moment in my life, and the reason I'm going to work so hard for the next 40 days or so is because I know so many people are now counting on me.
Okay, thank you very much. So, John Morgan, Dr. Stephanie Haridopoulos, thank you so much for coming in and helping engage us in this conversation. Thank you to the people who helped put this on, and thank you to all of you who've watched and engaged and hopefully gotten better informed today. Thanks so much. This broadcast will be available later on sunsentinel.com.
Thank you.